Welcome, everybody. It is so unbelievably good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. My name is Miki Speer. I am a musician, author, cat lover, and host of tonight's show, The Healing Half. And tonight we have a very, very special guest. Leah is here to talk to us about how grief changes over time. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear her story and her words of wisdom. So, for those of you who are brand new, first of all, welcome. It is so good to see all of you here. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the page and follow me on Facebook or YouTube. Whatever it is, I want to make sure these videos get into your hands and you can watch the replays any time. And if you would like to be on my reminder list, I go through before every show and send out the link directly to my fans. Please just message me. I put that link in the comment section. So from there, right before the show, you get a link from me personally, and you can watch it on your own time. So if you're interested in that, please just let me know that I can do that for you. So a lot of you are asking, how did Grace in Space go this weekend? I threw a grief event with two amazing co-hosts, Tammy Speer and Colleen Pulvermacher, who I think are in the chat. So feel free to give them some love. And we had an amazing 3+ hours at my dad's house. The weather was a little interesting in the morning, so we ended up moving it inside just to find out that it actually didn't end up raining. But better safe than sorry. Everybody showed up. There were tears, there were laughs. Out of privacy for the folks that attended, I'm not going to show any photos now until I get their permission, just to make sure that they're okay with me sharing. But we had an absolute blast. It was such a godsend, and I really appreciate all of you guys who prayed to make sure that that happened so smoothly and that lives were able to be touched in that way. So if you are interested in joining us next year, we decided we're going to try and do an annual thing for Grace in Space. So keep us posted if you were there, if there's anything we can do to make it better for next year, and we're so excited to do that again. But speaking of Grace in Space, one of the activities that we did, and I wanted to share it with you tonight because a lot of you wanted to make it, but whether it was a scheduling thing or a distance thing, you just weren't able to do that, and that's okay. Is we went around the room, we introduced ourselves and our loved ones who passed away that we were there to honor. And so we're going to do that for you tonight. We've got Leah here, and she's going to dedicate the episode to two very special people. And then I'm going to sing you the song that I sang at Grace in Space. So if you have a candle, go grab it. Go grab it and light it like I have one now. This is a really great activity that you can do anytime, whether it's just a personal thing or at a holiday. There's lots of great ways that you can just bring your loved one into the room by lighting a candle in their honor. And so I'm going to sing an original song that's going to be coming out this fall. So I'm really excited. I'm just going to do it a cappella, if that's okay. And so we're just going to go a little out of order tonight, but I think it's going to be good. And I think it's going to all tie together. So I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to go grab your candles. And then I'm going to bring Leah on to share her dedication. Hey, Leah, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Miki. Thanks for having me on your show. I am really excited. My name is Leah Anderson, and I am dedicating the show this evening to my grandfather, Paul Stevens. You see him there in the picture, and that was me as a baby. And then my mother, Rita Jean Stevens-Root. So these are very, very special people to me, and you'll get to hear more about my story and these two individuals after Miki's song.
Awesome. We're so excited, and thank you. And it's always so good to have someone else who's lost a mom on the show. So this next song goes out to you, Leah, to your mom, and to your wonderful grandpa, and to anybody watching who has lost anyone. Please join me in lighting a candle. Again, for you this just joining, this is what we did at Grace in Space to kick off the event, and it was one of my favorite parts of the event. So you can light it for anyone that is close to you. So this one is dedicated to her mom and her grandpa. So this song is called Light a Candle for Me. I am going, for those of you who don't know, I love, love, love to write grief songs, which is kind of an interesting little niche, but I just find music so therapeutic. So if you find music so therapeutic, please join me in listening here. So I'm going to sing Light a Candle for Me which is I'm going to be releasing it, and I wrote it, and I'll be releasing it this fall. You know some doors can't be opened, and words can't heal a heart that's broken. And holding me in your arms is what you really need. But in the meantime, you can light a candle for me and let the flame light up the room like my smile used to do. And let good memories begin to fill your mind. Don't be afraid to say my name and begin to share your pain. And remember, I'm right by your side. And no, we can't go back to the way it used to be. But in the meantime, you can light a candle for me. Thank you guys so much. That means so much to me and my family. I really appreciate all your compliments. The lyrics are in the chat. So I think it's so important anytime we are grieving to lean into that feeling. And I think what Leah's going to do a really great job of reminding us today is that that never goes away. And I think that's the biggest thing, if I could just shake out of our culture, is that this idea that time just makes the pain go away. So please welcome Leah back on. We are absolutely going to dive into some really, really great topics tonight. So Leah, it's so good to have you. Thank you for being here. Do you mind giving us a little background on your story and kind of how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. So, really, where it started, I was a young girl. My mother, Rita, was diagnosed with cancer when I was 4, and she suffered through that illness for about 6 years of my life, so 6 years of hers as well. She was diagnosed when she was 28, and really kind of that our life became normal dealing with hospital
Yeah.
medicine, chemotherapy, radiation, that type of thing. She did pass when I turned 10. My sister was not quite 9, and we lost her. So there were 10 short years of my life that I had my mom with me. But you know what? Those 10 years were so impactful and left such an imprint on my heart that it's still with me. And July 5th, this past July 5th would have marked 30 years of her passing. And I think that it's been a long time, but there's so much in the way that my grief has shifted and changed throughout those 30 years. It isn't gone. She's not gone. Her memory's not gone. And that's what I want to share, is that it just looks different. It looks different for all of us, but keeping those memories alive through us, through our children, through our family members, by talking about it is so therapeutic and important to continue to keep that person in our hearts and share.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm over here crying. So, oh my gosh, it is so good. Thank you. Your story just reminds me so much of my own story with my mom dying, like you said, the cancer, the hospitals. And so thank you for sharing, because one of the things that we talked about at Grace in Space is when we share, we give other people permission to be vulnerable. So you're doing that for me right now. So thank you so much. One question that I kind of had is, could you kind of walk through the differences that you really noticed between I'm a 10-year-old and my mom just died versus I'm a teenager and it's been a couple years versus I'm now a 20-year-old and I'm getting married. And I know that's a lot. So maybe let's start with like the initial difference between 10-year-old versus teenager.
Yeah. I think that what my mom provided me was a lot of that emotional, physical love. It was there, it was present for those 10 years of my life, so that when she died, that was just a huge piece of that was gone. So wanting that emotional and physical connection with a mother, with another person, and granted, I had my dad and my grandfather there, just that yearning to have that with your mom. So it was like I was just floating about as that young girl, not having that. I remember being in my room some nights just crying, yearning for her to be there, and missing that so much, like that physical, that hug. I love you, Leah. You're special, Leah. So what I feel happened as I began to shift from that young girl into a teenager was that I was like looking for that. I wanted it so bad. I started looking for it in all the wrong places. I, engaged in dysfunctional behaviors because I was seeking that feel-good feeling of the emotional, physical love. So throughout being a teenager, I kind of buried that piece of really needing to process being a growing teenage girl, needing that, not having it, going out and finding it in different arenas that were not healthy.
Sure.
Thank goodness throughout those periods, as I was progressing into more adulthood, I had some people in my life that would say, Leah, get your head out of your butt, and in this core piece of me, I knew that that's not, my mom didn't want me to make poor choices. She wanted me to find love. She wanted me to be loved. She was there loving me, but just not the way that I wanted it, in that physical being.
Right.
And when I progressed into my later teen years, early adulthood, I felt like I knew that I wanted to be a better me. I wanted to not engage in those dysfunctional behaviors. I wanted to somehow figure out how I can be better at loving me, loving others, because I knew if I couldn't figure out how to love me, I wouldn't be able to love other people. So in my 20s, I did delve more into that therapeutic arena. I feel personally that for myself, really a lot of my grief was processed through different therapists. I was fortunate to have gone to a few different therapists, and that's not for everybody. It's not like, oh, I just want to dump everything out on the table for someone, but having those opportunities allowed me to have some aha moments. Now, did it shift my thinking completely? No, but as I moved into then 20s, getting into relationships, what did I want those relationships to look like? It's weird when you lose someone who's given you so much love and you want love so bad, but you're still like have this trust barrier, like this getaway closer. You want to be loved, but you're scared because if you love too hard, you might lose them. I remember experiencing that like in my 20s as I was beginning to establish a more meaningful relationship with my husband. And how do I let go and allow someone to love someone and then someone to love me without feeling like they're going to be gone? And then shifting into like having my children, that I would say really shifted the grief piece, because there's just this component of having a child and wanting your mom to be there so bad and wanting her to see your baby. And like this is more emotional for me, is like you want them to see your baby, you want them to meet your baby, to hug your baby, to love their grandchildren. And so that part was even harder than like the marriage part, because you want someone to be proud of like who you are, who you've become, this person you've made. And so like it just doesn't go away. It just shifts.
Oh, wow. Sorry, I'm crying over here because everything you said is just so beautiful. So thank you for sharing. Kind of, I want to touch on that mom piece for sure, because I've heard a lot of people talk about how their grief of their mom resurfaced when they became a mom. So was there, and I think that sounds like that tracks, right? That equation makes sense. So, kind of going back to Leah in that first moment where you found out you're pregnant and all of a sudden this grief that's always been there, but it's really starting to rear its head. How did any advice for anyone who's in that moment? Me, not now, but eventually. Um, what would you tell your old self who's about to have a kid whose mom is no longer around? And I think that's going to be good for all of us because we all know people who've lost, whether it's a mom or a dad, and then they go into this new chapter, and it's easy for us to forget that that new chapter might be really stirring up some grief. So any advice that you have to people either in that situation or hoping to help people in that situation?
One thing that I have done throughout, I have three boys, throughout the births of my children, and a way for me to feel like my mom is still there was to bring her into those processes, to bring her picture and put it up when I went to the hospital,
Oh my
to
god.
have her or a piece of her, something that she valued, or just a memory, a keepsake with me in those moments. So there wasn't this like grand, processing or talking about it, but that she was there. Like, here's a picture of her. I would set her on the windowsill, and she was with me. My sister and I are only a year apart, so like having her with me also feels like my mom's a part of that process too. So for me, it's just creating a space to have her with me, whether it means a keepsake, a memory, a prayer, a picture, however that looks. And for me, that's a special way that I keep her alive.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And a kind of a follow-up to that, did you notice, because after the births, of course, and I know kids are busy and it's all that stuff, in the raising of the kids, was there anything did that change? Did I know, because of course the theme of the night is how grief has kind of changed throughout it. So how did it change from I'm birthing and I'm going through that to like I'm raising my kids? And was there any fear? How did you tackle all the fears that come with that?
Yeah. There are so many like dynamics of being a mom, and especially not particularly having somebody to just get right on the phone with and totally vent those raw feelings to. Like, I feel crazy, I can't do this, oh my gosh, I got home and I'm like peeing myself, or whatever, those terrible moments that you just feel like you can't tell anybody but you want to tell your mom.
Yeah.
Those pivotal moments I was just wanting, and it would come up in times where I was wanting advice, I was wanting feedback, I was wanting someone to normalize my feelings and my behaviors. I was wanting someone to be there to reassure me that I was doing the right thing. Those were probably the hardest parts. But one of the gifts that I feel my mom gave me is that I learned so much in the 10 years with her. One wouldn't think, and it blows my mind sometimes. The 10 years I was with her, I learned so much of how I want to be a parent. And so started implementing those things, sharing memories, taking my kids, showing them little plants, showing them little flowers, taking them special places on walks, because that's what my mom did. So keeping, once again, that memory alive through what I do with my children, because that's what my mom did with me.
Right. I love that. That legacy piece is so, so, so important. And for those of you listening, if you haven't downloaded your free copy of My Heart Still Remembers, head to my website. It's on there. It's mikispeer.com. A big piece of that, section 2, is all about legacy and being intentional with that, because I think people just kind of assume legacy just happens. But what I love about your story, Leah, is you said you sat down and you actually thought, how do I want to be a mom? Like, I mean, I think that's a question, and I'm sure all moms are doing an amazing job. I'm not trying to mom shame anyone, but you sometimes wish, sometimes in the hustle and bustle of life, it's really easy to not think how, what legacy do I want to carry on, and is this really the behavior I want to be doing? And I know I've caught myself within marriage or friendships kind of coasting sometimes and not being very intentional. So I love that you're keeping your mom's legacy alive by doing the best you can as a mom and doing the things that she taught you. And I think it's so beautiful because your sons know your mom because they know you. And that is so powerful. So thank you for being just like a beacon of awesomeness across the board. I'm just so blessed to know you. And then the question that I kind of have is, obviously, like you said, it's been 30 years. What do you wish people who would kind of say something like, it's been a long time, like, not get over it, but like, oh, you're still upset about that? Do you have anything that, like, we as supporters of people who are grieving or people grieving ourselves could kind of come back with like a statement to that statement?
That's always a hard spot to be in when it almost makes you feel like discounted in your grief. And not to say like every day is a bad day, that there's so many moments that come up that aren't good. Most of my memories are really good. But leaving that open, I know I do some work at school with the kids that I have in my professional job, and that continue to tell that story, continue to share those memories, that it's not about I'm dwelling on it. It's that I'm trying to keep them alive in my heart and my mind.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what keeps me happy. And that's what keeps me moving forward and hoping that that will help others. So
I love that. Yeah, I know one of the things I just get so lucky as the host of the show, I get to learn so much. And a common theme between you and other speakers I've had is they've said talking, the only way is through it, right? And the more we tell our story, the more we own our story, and the more we own our story, the more we can heal through our story. And so I think that's such a good comeback, if that's the right word to use, is saying, well, talking through it really helps me process and it keeps their memory alive. So I'd encourage whoever said that to also be like, you've probably got stuff you're not
right.
processing. And again, as grief changes over time, as you meet people who do not have as you meet people who have a lot of unaddressed grief surrounding, childhood parental losses, is there anything that you wish you would have? I know you kind of mentioned it in your story earlier, but I'll just have a little recap. Wish you would have done differently for your own grief journey from a 10-year-old to your age now?
That's a loaded question.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. That is
Um,
way too big of a question.
no, but if I think about, I was, given my age, I think that wherever you're at, it's hard to be raw. It's hard to be vulnerable. But I found that when I can get there, it's like this release, having more raw and vulnerable moments versus feeling like I need to walk on eggshells around somebody or not say something because I'm worried about how they might feel or how they might judge me. You know what? Whatever. And I think that takes time too to get out of that feeling of like I don't care what people think. But really, in order to continue to process being raw, being vulnerable, allowing that conversation to be had. And if those moments come up where it feels like it's the right time to have the conversation, or even if it feels like maybe it's not quite the right time, it's okay. Just dive in and try to do it, because we don't do it often enough. And a lot of times it isn't until somebody like talks about that person or probes or says, hey, that it can get that conversation going. I know that example, when we had our reunion this past weekend, I love it when people tell me stories about my mom. I didn't get to know her as an adult. I didn't get to know her, what she was like. I only knew what I knew as a child. So when people tell me stories about my mom, when people share things about my mom, when people ask me about my mom 30 years later, I feel so appreciative that they're like, they remember her. They remember her life. They care enough to tell me and share with me what she was like. So being raw and vulnerable and not being afraid of it.
I love that. Oh my gosh, and I'm crying, so you all get to see me be vulnerable today on the screen. So thank you, Leah, for that wonderful, wonderful tip. One of the big things that I pulled out of that is we don't have to wait for somebody to bring it up. It's almost like it's like give ourselves permission to talk about what matters to us and screw what anybody else thinks. Like to be honest, I know I always feel that way too, where it's like I don't want to make them awkward. I don't want to make them feel bad, so I'm not going to talk about myself. But as a result of that, in a weird roundabout way, we're lying, right? Because we're not bringing our real self forward. And if we want real community, people can like the people you want to be in community with can handle those kind of one-off comments, and they can handle us bringing up stuff because that's a huge part of our lives. So thank you for that. I'm going to make sure I kind of make a mental note about giving ourselves a permission slip to not have to wait for permission to bring up something that's on our mind. So, as we kind of come up to our time today, I really appreciate all of your wisdom. Is there anything else that you would kind of like to leave us with? I know we didn't get to talk much about your grandpa and how he stepped up for you, and I know that was a really big loss for you as well. Did you notice any compounding losses in that regard?
I was fortunate enough to have been with my grandpa all of my life. So we lived with him from when I was a baby up until I stayed with him until he passed, like when I was like 27. So I was definitely with my grandpa. I was so kind of like stuck in this selfishness of being a young adult and wanting to do what I wanted to do that I wish I would have gotten to know him more. I wish I would have taken his wisdom. I wish I would have enjoyed the slow rides to the grocery store. Sorry, you can hear my children in the background.
Nope, no worries, no worries.
I get so irritated with these like slow rides to the grocery store. You know what? I would give anything today to ride with him to the grocery store and have him take his sweet time, because those pieces and his story and who he was, that was hard when he passed, because I didn't take advantage of knowing his life more.
Yeah.
So, and then that was another piece to my mom, and not having had more conversation with him of what it was like when she was a child from his perspective. So yeah, it was tough.
Well, you've been through so much, and I am so grateful for your stories, and I'm crying because your story is just so touching to me, and I just really appreciate you being on here and sharing all your wisdom with all of us. So thank you so much for being here, Leah. We really, really appreciate you.
I am grateful to be on your show. And if any of you that do know me and you have an opportunity or want to talk about any of your lost loved ones or any situations, I welcome that opportunity. I welcome that vulnerability. I think it's important that we keep sharing our stories.
Oh, Leah, you're a rock star. Thank you so much. I am so blessed by you. We're all so blessed by you. And I've got to like re-listen to this about 12 times and just take notes because you had gold nuggets throughout the whole conversation. So thank you so much for being here today. It's so great to see you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, isn't she amazing? Mention that in the comments if you liked Leah. Holy cow. I am like crying over here because her story just means so much to me as someone who lost a mom young, and then my grandma recently passed away. Man, oh man. But a couple things, because I know part of the reason why we're on this show is because we want to learn how we can help others. So not only help ourselves and give ourselves those permission slips we need to give ourselves, but also how can we be more graceful? How can we be more aware? And how can we be more kind to people who are grieving? And so I'm just going to kind of end on summarizing that. So one of the big things that Leah talked about is how it doesn't just go away. And if you know somebody who has experienced a traumatic loss of any kind, it's important for you to know that that's not like a one-off thing that happened in their past, but that's part of the fabric of who they are. So again, bring it up if they're comfortable talking about it, because you got to talk through it, right? Remember that certain big life events that they are going through, like a pregnancy or a marriage, might resurface some grief. So as somebody who knows about someone's backstory, you say, hey, their their mom died when they were young, but I wonder if this upcoming event is going to trigger something for them. That's just good for us all to be aware of. Or holiday times, even if it's been 30 years, it still can be hard for people. And so that was one of the biggest takeaways I had, was just remembering that grief changes, grief resurfaces, and grief rears its ugly head for no reason sometimes. But that's the beauty of community. So the last big takeaway is, try as a someone supporting someone who's grieving to create a safe space and give them a time and a place to like have that conversation. We talked about the target. Who remembers the target from episode 1, I think? So I'm going to bring it back up. So there's a target. We all have one. And on the outer ring is people who are like acquaintances. On our inner ring is people who are, we're friends, but we're not like that close. And then there's our immediate center. And those people are our 911 people. And that goes out to Tammy, who coined that term. The people that are like, this is your flock, and this is who you take care of, and this is who takes care of you, right? In that center, kind of ask yourself, can I give that person, even if it's been a long time, space to air some of this out? Again, most people feel awkward bringing it up, even if it's a huge part of their life. So I just kind of given us all permission to be extra kind to those in our center circle, and really go out of your way to think, man, this happened to this person. How can I show up for them in that way? This happened to that person. Maybe I can, bring them lunch and just say, let's talk about your mom. I know that anniversary is coming up. I'd love to give you some space for that. And then last but certainly not least, the biggest takeaway, of course, that Leah said, is just share our own stories. So, Leah, thank you for sharing yours. When you share your story, even if it's through tears on a talk show host that you are host, even if it's through tears, when we share our stories, we give other people permission to be vulnerable. There is no shame in crying. There is no shame in kind of breaking down and needing to take a little bit of a break. But as a culture, we don't do that very well. In fact, we do like the opposite of that, which is make people feel bad sometimes. So sometimes you have to be the change you want to see in the world. So let's all do it together by following Leah's amazing example and sharing our stories when we feel like it, and stop waiting for permission. Thank you all so much for being here today. I cannot wait for next year's Grace in Space. If you haven't yet, make sure you jump on my email list. I send out a summary after every single episode that's going to have summary notes and everything you need to know. And if this is bringing up stuff for you, grief is hard. Please get your copy of My Heart Still Remembers. It's my free gift to all of you. And that can be found on my website, which is www.mikispeer.com. Thanks, you guys. Have a great night.